Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Squadron Leader Brianna Sharp. We warmly welcome the family of Private John Thomas Naven, whose story will be told shortly. Today marks the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Midway, a decisive Allied naval victory and a major turning point in the Second World War. The battle was fought between Japanese and American carrier forces near Midway Atoll, a territory of the United States in the Central Pacific, from the 4th to the 17th of June 1942. The Japanese combined fleet aimed to invade the atoll and lure the smaller US Pacific Fleet into a decisive battle. The Japanese believed that the destruction of the US fleet, just 6 months after the initial attack on Pearl Harbor, would be the final blow for the Americans, forcing them to sue for a negotiated peace with Japan. Crucially, the US Pacific's Fleet Commander-in-Chief, Admiral Chester Nimitz, had been warned of Japanese intentions through ULTRA, the Allied code-breaking network. Putting his faith in ULTRA decrypts, Nimitz placed 2 carrier groups in waiting to ambush the Japanese. The Japanese were not aware of the American carrier's presence off Midway until it was too late. American dive bombers, sighting the unsuspecting Japanese fleet through a break in the clouds, caused havoc. In just 5 minutes, on the morning of the 4th of June, American aircraft disabled 3 Japanese carriers. A 4th Japanese carrier was destroyed in the mid-afternoon. In just 1 day, the Japanese combined fleet lost 4 modern carriers, 248 carrier aircraft, and over 3,000 sailors and air crews. The Americans lost 1 carrier, the USS Yorkton, sunk on the 7th of June. It was a decisive American victory and a savage blow to Japanese naval power. There was now parity in naval power in the Pacific, but the Japanese would never recover from the losses inflicted at Midway. From 1942 to 1944, the Japanese Navy would maintain 6 carriers. In the same period, the might of the American industrial power saw the US Navy launch 14 carriers, 9 light carriers, and 66 escort carriers. The Japanese were now on the defensive in the Pacific, and the initiative lay with the Allies. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We also acknowledge the members of the RSL and Services Club Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching this ceremony broadcast around Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and families to the memorial. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private John Navin. John Thomas Navin was born in 1891 in Lismore, New South Wales, to the large family of Edward and Bridget Navin. John Navin grew up in Lismore and attended the local public school, after which he worked as a surveyor's labourer. Following the outbreak of the First World War, Navin enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in Lismore on the 10th of September 1915. After his initial training, he was allotted to the 9th Reinforcements to the 25th Battalion. He embarked from Brisbane on the 31st of January 1916 aboard the transport ship Wandilla, bound for Egypt. In early April, Navin was transferred to the 49th Battalion as part of the expansion and reorganisation of the AIF. The 49th Battalion departed Egypt in June and sailed to Marseille, France. After a period of service near Armentières in what was known as the nursery sector, a relatively quiet area where troops were introduced to trench warfare, the 49th Battalion was sent south to take part in the Battle of the Somme. The 49th's first major battle was at Mouquet in September. Navin and several other men were detailed as a working party. They carried ammunition, food and water up the line, often under extremely heavy shell fire. Even when relieved, Naven and his comrades volunteered to keep going until sheer exhaustion set in. Brigadier Thomas Glasgow awarded each man in the party a Commander-in-Chief's congratulatory card for their unstinting efforts. After Mouquet Farm, the 49th Battalion was sent to the quieter Ypres sector, but came south again in October and endured the bitter winter of 1916, while rotating in and out of the front line. When the German army withdrew their prepared positions, known as the Hindenburg Line, in February 1917, the 49th Battalion was involved in following them up. On the 2nd of April, the 49th Battalion took part in the capture of Nouroy. During this action, Naven received a gunshot wound to the head. He was taken to the 3rd Casualty Clearing Station, where he died the following day from his wounds. He was laid to rest in Pozières, the British cemetery. He was 26 years old. John Naven's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among more than 60,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private John Thomas Naven, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, or the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We'd like to thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial. Wish you all a very good night. Thank you.